All right, let's dive into one of the most astonishing underdog stories in all of military history. This is a story about a battle where a single, isolated commander faced totally impossible odds, and somehow, against all logic, pulled off a legendary victory. We're talking about the Battle of Auerstadt.
So this is the big question, right? I mean, just think about that for a second. How is that even possible? You are outnumbered more than 2-1 by an army that's supposed to be one of the best in Europe. This should have been a total wipeout. So how on earth did it actually happen?
Wow, yeah, just let those numbers sink in. It wasn't even a close fight on paper. Davout's Third Corps was absolutely dwarfed by the main Prussian army. This really shows you the terrifying reality his soldiers were facing that morning. I mean, conventional wisdom doesn't just say you're going to lose, it says you're going to be completely annihilated.
And, as if being outnumbered wasn't bad enough, Davout was completely, totally on his own. You see, on this very same day, Napoleon himself was miles away, fighting a battle at Jena against what he thought was the main Prussian force. Well, he was wrong. Because of one massive intelligence screw-up, his marshal, Davout, had just accidentally marched his men straight into the real enemy army. Help was not on the way. To even begin to understand how this impossible victory came about, we have to start with the revolutionary weapon Davout had at his command, the French Grand Army. Seriously, this was not like any army that had ever come before it. The secret sauce really was this thing called the corps system. So instead of having one huge, clumsy army lumbering across the countryside, Napoleon had this brilliant idea. He broke his forces up into these smaller, much more agile corps. You can think of each one as its own mini-army, fully kitted out with its own infantry, cavalry, and artillery. They could basically fight on their own for a pretty long time. And that's what made them so dangerous. Because each corps was self-contained, they could march separately and much faster, living off the land instead of waiting for slow supply wagons to catch up. This gave the French incredible flexibility and speed. They could swarm an enemy from multiple directions. Davout's Third Corps was just a perfect example of this powerful idea in action. And it wasn't just about how they were organized. This army was a true meritocracy. You got promoted based on talent, not because of who your dad was. The soldiers were battle-hardened veterans who went through intense training, and they were fiercely loyal to Napoleon. And maybe most importantly, they genuinely believed they couldn't be beaten. But even the best army in the world is just a tool. It needs a master craftsman to make it work. And in this specific crisis, the French had exactly the right man for the job, Marshal Louis-Nicolas Davout. This quote pretty much nails it. They called him the Iron Marshal, and for good reason. He was known for being incredibly stern, always wearing his glasses, and just having this absolute refusal to ever accept defeat. He was, without a doubt, one of Napoleon's most capable commanders, maybe the most capable. So what was it about this guy? Well, first off, he was a tactical genius who could just read a battlefield in an instant. But more than that, he was completely unshakable. When things got bad and other people started to panic, Davout just got colder, more focused. He demanded absolute perfection, and his troops trusted him completely because they knew he would never, ever waste their lives. Okay, so we've got a superior army and a superior commander. But that's only one side of the coin. To really get the full picture of Davout's victory, we have to flip it over and look at the profound weaknesses of his opponent. And man, this right here tells you everything you need to know. On the French side, you have one man, Davout, making clear, quick, decisive calls. On the Prussian side, it was a total mess. Command was basically run by a committee. You had the king, the Duke of Brunswick, a bunch of other generals, all arguing with each other. It was just a perfect recipe for complete paralysis. The Prussian army, which had been the terror of Europe under Frederick the Great, was just living on its old reputation. Its tactics were rigid, old-fashioned, and just couldn't handle the kind of flexibility the French brought to the field. They were slow to make decisions, and their leadership was a mess of personal rivalries. They were basically an 18th century army facing a 19th century storm. All right, so let's put all the pieces on the board. You've got a flexible, modern army led by a brilliant, unshakable commander going up against a larger but rigid and indecisive opponent. Now we can see how the battle itself actually played out. The battle itself was just a masterclass in defense and counterpunching. First, in the thick morning fog, Davout quickly seized a key village, Hassenhausen, which gave him an anchor for his entire defensive line.
Then, for hours, his veteran infantry formed into squares and just calmly beat back wave after wave of what was supposed to be Europe's best cavalry. Finally, Davout sensed the moment had come. The Prussians were hesitating, their commander was dying, so he launched this perfectly timed, decisive counterattack. That was it. That was the final straw. The Prussian line shattered, and the army just broke and ran. So, there it is. That's the blueprint for how you pull off the impossible. It wasn't any single thing. It was this lethal combination of a better way of fighting, iron-willed leadership, battle-hardened soldiers, and an enemy who was fatally flawed. You take away any one of those pieces, and this historic victory just doesn't happen. You know, the story of Auerstadt is so much more than just a battle. It leaves us with this timeless question. When everything is on the line and you're facing a massive crisis, what's actually more important? The brute force of having more people, or the clarity, the resolve, and the brilliance of one single focused mind?